Discover over 100 episodes of Bartholomewtown on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Bartholomewtown Podcast.
You really have a lot of content in this area. It's funny because I was just at Roger Williams University and I said, listen, content is key, but contacts are king.
Welcome in to another edition of the Bartholomewtown Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. On today's episode, I circle back with Rhode Island content machine, Ben DeCastro. And Mr. Ben DeCastro, yes indeed, he was guest number 2 on the Bartholomewtown Podcast, also a panelist on Election Day in Rhode Island last year, that episode, and now circling back on episode 133, and lots to catch up on with Big Ben. I mean, come on, now the guy's a big-time television star over on Channel 10. He's broadcasting on drive time morning radio on Cat Country 98.1. He's still the voice of the Pawtucket Red Sox. He's still doing his YouTube series, Carpooling with Ben. He still co-hosts a podcast with Mary Larson, Wicked Roadie. This guy's literally accepting awards for his content with his left hand while putting out fires in the East Bay with his right hand. Not to mention a great friend, a big-time supporter of this program, and someone who I and many others in this market have learned quite a bit from. So wonderful to sit down with Mr. Ben DeCastro yet again here at the Loft and see what he's up to, and we'll get to it right after this. All right, if you're listening to this episode on release day, Friday, October 11th, tonight in Providence at the Loft, it's Elmwood Songwriters Club, presented by the Bartholomewtown Podcast and Lagunitas Brewing Company. Now, we've got a variety of artists for you from around the state, performing short, intimate sets right here at the Loft, with the order drawn at random. It's 2 songs per performer, plus a special guest to kick off the evening and stick around after the music for a lively discussion. It's Elmwood Songwriters Club, tonight at the Loft in Providence, presented by Bartholomewtown and Lagunitas Brewing Company. For complete details, head over to Instagram at Bartholomewtown Podcast. And a great way that you can support the pod is to subscribe, rate, and review on your preferred podcast app, or share an episode on social media. Okay, let's get right to it. Let's see what Ben DeCastro's up to. I guess if there ever were a Bartholomewtown Hall of Fame, you'd be on that first ballot, first ballot inductee. Ben DeCastro, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't even have a Hall of Fame yet for carpooling. I got to find a hall. Maybe it would be a Garage of Fame because it's a car thing.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Always great to be back here. And, listen, I'll say this right off the top, and I hope you don't edit it out. I am so proud of you and how you've grown this entity. I mean, you're in the 120 plus episode, almost 130 episode thing here. And it's getting to the point where, I think I was guest number 2.
Yes. And
between guest number 2 and 50 or 60, I had people saying, would call me up every now and then. It's like, hey, Ben, you did this Bartholomewtown thing.
Yeah.
Is this okay? Like, is it legit? Like, and I was, yes, go and do it. Yeah. Now you are becoming very much the go-to, like the next election cycle and everything else that's going on. This is going to be a mandatory stop. And you did great with the last one, but as you've established yourself also, on radio, WPRO, and you're doing everything else, I'm proud of you, man. It's a grind.
I appreciate it, brother, man. Huge inspiration on a lot of levels. Obviously,
I'm a putz,
but yeah, well, me too. I think that's the whole point. Putz can make it happen.
Yeah. Yep.
But I've been really excited about what you've been up to since I discovered your work. I was like, wow, here's a guy who's a musician, broadcaster, children's book, firefighter, and he's got a brand that is translated across social media. So I was like, wow, a guy in Rhode Island doing all this exciting stuff. And now it feels like you've kind of packaged that into, you've taken your persona. You're part of the team at Cat Country. You're part of the talent pool there. You're part of the talent pool on WJAR now through Studio 10,
yeah.
And, of course, the Pawtucket Red Sox,
yeah.
The voice of the
Rattle the
Sox right there.
There you go.
So what's that like now? A year and a half after we sat down last,
Sure.
Things are kind of like clicking at another level for you.
Well, it all goes back to an important lesson that, really what got me a start here in Rhode Island was, Carty's Furniture and working there for 15 years. And I literally, obviously, unfortunately, in the last, month, in August, we lost Nick Carty.
Yep.
There's just such an amazing story around that as well, and I'll hold off on that. But when I started there, I really was just had a front row seat to how 3 legends and just a family, a legendary family in the area, had control and worked so hard. And the one thing that I was always told, and all three of them felt this way, but specifically Pete would always tell me, you've always got to have a mix. You can't just, there's no one silver bullet out there. You've always got to have a mix when it comes to advertising. You got to be on TV, you got to be on radio, print, billboard. Everybody would say, oh, print is dead. Well, print is actually still very important, and it still plays a role, and it's still, it's how do you adapt? How do you adjust? And when you're starting to add different methods as the pie, so to speak, gets sliced in additional pieces, when there's digital, there's social media, there's podcasting, because there's listeners for everything. So having that wide range, that multi-tool approach is something that they really helped me to understand firsthand. And going into now, I've done I was doing stuff at WPRO for a while.
Yep.
You've since have started over there, and it's great. It's an excellent medium. Then I went had an opportunity to do 15 straight weeks over at Cat Country mornings.
Yeah, which you were hilarious on, by the way. I found myself legitimately flipping over there and really enjoying some of those segments, because just the gags and everything of like classic Cat Country being, I think it's the number one station, right?
Right now, yeah. Well, here you're only as good as your last book, just like you're only as good as your last podcast. I'm only as good as my last whatever I'm doing. But I got to credit a lot of that to Brian Mulhern, because and I actually got to credit Amanda Leonardo for getting pregnant and giving me the opportunity. Thank you. No, but Brian was a writer for Phil Hartman. For a number of years, actually was one of the last people he spoke with the day before Phil tragically was killed by his wife, and there's a whole story around that and documentaries and stuff. But Brian, when I went into it, I came out of a talk radio mentality where I had all the room in the world to fill bigger blocks, and he said, "Okay, everything's got to tie back. Don't forget the listeners." He coached me for 15 weeks straight. And I mean, and Brian has had quite a career on many different fronts.
Yep.
And so to be able to have that school, Bob Walker, as far as the programming director, I didn't feel like a kid who just came out of college who was told, okay, here, let me show you the ropes and show you what to do. With them, it was a mutual respect level where they said, anything video, anything you want to do, go ahead. And when it comes to radio stuff, we'll help you. And they really, helped to shape that. And so, I didn't go to college. I didn't go to high school, but I've been through the Rhode Island school of incredible, insight and knowledge. And even at WPRO, I don't want to shun them. Doug McGonigal, awesome. Tony Mascaro, who was the program director there. Gene, Tara, Matt, Dan, Gresh, although I've never filled in for Gresh's show specifically, because I'm not a sports guy. That would be fascinating. But yes, that would be
all paw socks.
That'd be a ratings bonanza for sure. I just tell you how to read names because he's a sports guy. But even John DePietro, the first time I ever did some radio stuff, I got a message from JD saying, "Hey, listen, you did great. Good job." And it really is. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of that feedback. And now Studio 10, a lot of fun.
Now you're on. WJR launched a lifestyle program, Studio 10. It runs at 12:30 Monday through Friday. We just had Lindsay Adeluca on the program on the Bartholomewtown Podcast from Studio 10. And in a way, it seemed like, all right, they're going after the road show. They're trying to capture that local television space. But at the same time, it's really a unique show. It airs at a totally different time and has a different flavor to it. And you're a major contributor now to that.
Yeah, having some fun with that. And, it allows me the flexibility to still do the other things that I like to do, but also, get my content in different places. You think back to it, and a lot of people said, the whole roadshow thing, which, Will, Michaela, Brendan, great people, love them dearly. But the roadshow is different, and Studio 10 is different because it's at a different time set, and they really have a different kind of feel to it. I hate to use this term, it's more Barstool-esque, if you will, and that's just me. That's not my perception of it. It's not anybody's official, where, Megan Kayada, who's the producer, and Scott Isaacs, who's the news director, and Matt Leibowitz and Vic Vetters over there at 10, the kind of the management direction team. They're not just pigeonholing it into, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's going to be A, B, and C. It's okay. Let's get great content from people, and so long as these people are producing great content, let's go with it and see how this grows and see how it naturally goes. And if you step back in the Wayback Machine, NBC WJAR was they had PM Magazine way back in the day. Matt Lauer, who is, I think he's on his disgrace tour right now.
Right, and his helicopter is permanently parked out on Long Island.
Yeah, but he was an anchor here. So was Meredith Vieira, and I mean, this is there were a few other big names. It escapes me right now, but that was kind of the whole crux of this whole thing. So when these shows kind of kicked back up, a number of years ago with the Road Show, and then and I was working with that with Cardi's, but now with Studio 10, you look and you see how it's different, and how they're different from each other, and how they can complement different elements of the state. And so you really have a lot of content in this area. It's funny because I was just at Roger Williams University, and I said, listen, content is key, but contacts are king. And you got to have the contacts. You got to have the right people. You got to know, how to make those connections. And a lot of it goes back to, and I'm just name dropping left and right here, but Stu Giannini, who he teaches over at Meeting Street, but for years he was the creative services director over at WPRI. The whole Road Show was really his vision many years ago about being this mobile, kind of on the road, always on the go. And he was a creator, he was a director and videographer of the Cardi's commercials for a number of years. He's been on a ton of different projects, but it's really impressive. It goes back, it all comes around. So it's great. I'm excited. Studio 10. If you haven't seen it, it's a wonderful show. The segments are great, and yeah, we're just having fun with it.
Yeah, I noted too, Lindsay Adeluca in the episode we did, that it reminds me of the locally produced Salty Shack, the Bozo the Clown that WNAC would produce.
Sure.
Just hyper locally generated and broadcasted television.
Right.
It just lives in this little island.
Yeah.
But that's who it's for, and so it's like reggae music or New Orleans music. In the sense, just hyper local, and anyone on the outside, they can peer in if they'd like, but you're delivering to a Rhode Island audience.
You are, but something they did, and I don't know if it was intentional, I certainly saw it, is they named it Studio 10, and that allows, because the Rhode Island, if you look at the numbers, and I used to do that a lot with advertising, the Providence DMA, the demographic market area, the defined market area rather, it extends out to New Bedford. Channel 10, their call it is WJAR Providence, New Bedford. They have a repeater over in New Bedford. Out on Cape Cod, they watch Channel 10. They watch Providence stations, I should say. Right. Over in Connecticut, when you start getting just over the line into the Putnams, or you start going down the south areas, where the aquarium is,
Mystic,
Pawcatuck,
all that
absolutely.
Business, yeah.
That's all. That's all part of that whole area. So it's not a show that's restricted to Rhode Island, and it allows it, I think, to breathe even deeper and have a great reach. So it's great. It's excellent.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, you think about the Public's Radio changing their name from Rhode Island Public Radio just to try to grasp a hold of particularly in their case, the southeast, I guess, what do you call it, the South Shore of
South Shore area,
that region. And it makes sense, why let state boundaries determine. I mean, obviously the media market is as such already. Sure. That's not a create new thing, but it branding to the entire market. And
I think, and some of that, I think my eyes were really opened, especially recently. Obviously with Cardi's, they've got stores in New Hampshire, they got stores in Western Mass, they got stores all over the place. So it wasn't a stranger to me on that, but my eyes, were open once again when I started with Cat Country, and again reminded, okay, this is a huge area we're covering. It's a massive antenna that they're broadcasting on and covering these areas. I think you yourself, as you've been filling in, especially recently on Pro, that you look at a story that's happening. it's like Buddy Cianci 2.0
yeah.
over in Fall River.
Right.
And are you almost walk that fine line? Am I isolating all of Rhode Island by talking about Fall River? Or how can you because it really is a fascinating story.
That's nuts.
But to tie that back, that's important. I mean, WPRO, their physical building is closer to Fall River than Cranston.
Right.
It's
right.
Or pretty close. So it's like, where do you go with it? So it's always that delicate balance of how do you tie it all in, and it's just making that story connection, that storyline happen. So it's, but yeah, it's fun.
Since our last, I guess we did the election coverage, but even since then, the Boston Globe has moved into Providence,
Sure.
to Rhode Island, and especially Providence. They've got their offices in the Wexford building downtown.
Yep.
That's putting pressure on the Providence Journal and other outlets for sure. WPRI seems to be growing. At least some metrics suggested they had some growth in numbers. Just in terms of anecdotally, they seem to be moving more and more into building a platform for Nisi and Eli Sherman, obviously Tim White and
Yep.
Machado, to kind of become personal brands.
Yep.
That's healthy for Rhode Island media, right? And as someone who kind of moves about different places, does that seem like a good thing that we're in that competitive zone now?
It's healthy in the respect that it's always good to have those government watchdog agencies, and I mean the teams that cover those eye on politics that give you many different breaths. I mean, you look at the Nisis of the world, and he's a juggernaut in and of himself, coming from print, so he knows how to write. He knows how to create and communicate rather in written form, which is important. He boils down numbers. Eli Sherman, I actually met Eli briefly when we were at the funeral for Jim Taricani, and he's a person who I've seen some videos of him. It's not necessarily he's not necessarily the typical TV guy. He is so content driven and so numbers driven and digital, just investigative in that sense. And I'm not saying that he's bad on camera, but you could tell, his sweet spot, and he knows where his sweet spot is. From my observations, is really just doing a lot of this research, which is excellent, which you don't have the time to do. As far as Dan McGowan, he left WPRI to be part of this joint venture with Ed Fitzpatrick and Amanda Milkovits over at now at the Boston Globe. It's interesting how that comes down, and I don't know the numbers. I don't know if specifically the Boston Globe actual tangible readership has gone up. I don't know if more people are picking up the Boston Globe, but I do know that they have had people who are clicking on to the website, and it's growing. It's that regionalization. But even when you have regionalization and that growth, you still have to focus on the local, and there's got to be a healthy balance of it as well. You can't, in today's world, I very cautious how much negative journalism, I want to say negative journalism, but how much negative stories out there of, bad stuff happening, and, meaning, you've got to expose it. You've got to shed the light on it. But there's also an inherent responsibility to shed light on the good.
Definitely. Oh, I definitely agree with that, right?
Yeah. And if the newness of the Boston Globe being down in this area, the Rhode Island, field office, if you will, the newness of them, they have certainly done a great job. They're all obviously great journalists. They've done a great job at really uncovering some very, very disturbing, somewhat, just really deep stories. But at some point, if it's the constant negative, the negative stories or that dark side, or just, I think at some point somebody will start to say, oh, all right, well, okay, I get it. Yeah, the world sucks. Okay, yeah, it's a bad place. Bad people exist, and people are going to do shady stuff. But I think they have to, at some point, start say, okay, listen, and this is something that goes back to Hummel. Jim Hummel, who is, just a local legend here, who did all these, you paid for it series and all these different reports
popping out of the bushes, the whole thing.
Yeah, just we're gonna do this the hard way or the easy way. It's Hummel, and I used to believe I first met Hummel when I was a lifeguard in Barrington at the Barrington Y.
No way. Yeah.
He obviously,
that's a Rhode Island story right there.
Go,
it's like
right
Joe Trillo and Nick Mattiello fighting each other.
I know,
Princeton
the caulking gun and stuff. It's Buddy's smoldering log, the caulking gun. I mean, it all has a role. Talk about Rhode Island secrets, Area 51, but the whole Jim Hummel, started. He left ABC6 and he started doing his own thing, the Hummel Report, and he's grown that to a degree. But after a little bit of time, he said, "Look, I have to do some. I have a power here to do good," and that has helped, And so he's I think it's once a month at least, where he's, kind of highlighting a charity or local nonprofit. For me,
the Rhode Island Spotlight.
Exactly. Yeah. And you topple that with Lively Experiment, which he's had you on as well. So, he really gets it. So at some point, and don't get me wrong, Channel 12, they do a lot of great stuff in the community. Obviously, they have their Next Our Founders Day where they volunteer. They do the Meeting Street Telethon. Channel 10 does a ton of stuff, whether it be the Alzheimer's Walk, whether it be the various stuff for Tomorrow Fund. I mean, every station, ABC6 as well. Everybody works hard to help. I'm talking about specifically when you start putting so much of a highlight and a focus on, this is the hard-hitting news, and we're gonna get in there. We're uncovering the darkness. It at some point you just like, okay, that's good, that's great, but let's make people happy here. You have a responsibility,
right.
And not happy, but let's show people the good stuff that's here. And somebody had posted up a photo from a Patriots game where they were flipping through the program, and there's a full page ad in the Patriots program, and it's the Channel 12 investigators, and it's a dark thing. And
it's got that long group of people,
exactly.
16 people in a photo. Yeah,
which is
it's almost like Survivor Series teams for
exactly,
WWF.
Exactly.
Like,
Survivor, prudent silence. Yeah. Who will make it off? No, but I looked at that and I said, gee, I don't know if that was. I feel as though almost like, you're kind of missing your shot here, because I don't know what the demographics are. The people who go to Foxborough, Gillette Stadium, buying that program actually have access, who watch Channel 12 on a regular basis are going to go to the website. Yeah, maybe you did something, I don't know, and maybe they could change it. I don't know, but to me, it was just like, that's kind of, you're happy. It's the Patriots. It's supposed to be entertainment. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a good time, and it's just in case you forgot that people are trying to pull shady business at City Hall.
Right.
Here you go. Don't forget the world's some people still suck. So we'll find them.
Totally. I mean, this is purely speculative, and maybe
absolutely,
non-secular what I'm about to say, but I feel like when McGowan left for the Globe, you saw Channel 12 go, probably Nisi maybe thinking, oh man, wow, this is just a guess, but it seems like he got promoted to an editor's role.
Yep.
They definitely have been. It seems like they're shooting more Tim and Ted's Excellent Adventures type, 30 seconds. Yeah. Like they broke down the preliminary election for Fall River today.
Yep.
That they expanded Sherman's role. They moved Machado. They kind of came up with the investigators, this long panel. It seemed pretty well timed with the Globe thing, and maybe because the Globe has that kind of stark, dark feel to it, they went with that. I don't know. That's all I can think of.
It's totally their choice, and there's totally a place for it. My only thing is, you look at, you with the Bartholomewtown podcast, at some point, and anybody in social media, I always advise them, at some point you got to step back and analyze. You can have the paralysis of analysis where you just never do anything, but you can say, okay, listen, I did, out of the 120 episodes plus you've done, half of the, a portion of them have been about, non-profs and stuff. What is that healthy balance? And you got to figure out your own algorithm to keep your listeners engaged.
Right.
And yes, you need all that stuff. Channel 10 has a great team as well. Katie Davis, Parker Gavigan, and they have, web producers who are, kind of, they're the unnamed, or the, they're working very hard behind the scenes, digging and getting all that. Bill Rapley as well. So there's it's Rhode Island. There's no shortage of content around here.
That's right.
Unfortunately, it's Southern New England,
Reporter's
I should say.
dream.
Exactly. But you can do it in a way. Brian Crandall from NBC 10, he did a piece just last week where he was it's one of the elements of reporting that you have to do, where you have to kind of doing the walk and you're trying to get the answer as the person's walking. He didn't do it in a juvenile or, a junior varsity type of way. He did it in a very professional way when he was questioning Mayor Jaisal Correa out of Fall River. And it was just like, okay, the level of professionalism displayed there, and the way there was no sensationalization. There was no, it was just good, hard work. It was quality reporting and journalism. So, and you see that from Ted. You see that from the team over at WLNE from time to time. I mean, when it's appropriate, the various stations. So, yeah, you can have all that stuff, but at some point, you've got to. Okay, let's make sure that our messaging here isn't, we're the station for doom and gloom, covered life.
Yeah.
In all its various forms. And
I totally agree.
And it's nice that you can have elements like, inside the arena with the former mayor Joe Paolino. You can have that over at ABC6. You can have Roadshow. You can have Studio 10. You can have those different elements to have it a different look and a different approach. So, yeah. I just, it's one of those things where at some point, let's be sure that it's my only advice I would give, not that they would ever want it, to any outlet out there, is evaluate and make sure that your own algorithm is what is working for who you're trying to attract.
Last question. Since we last met in here, the Paw Sox
are
now becoming. There's one more season left.
Yep.
You're going with a team though to Worcester. Is that you're thinking? Or
the team has been very, very generous and has offered me and Dan Ray, Dr. Charles Steinberg, even Larry Lucchino. They've been very, very kind in offering me the position and saying, look, if you want to come to Worcester, we'll have you. Since we last talked, I have added to our family little foster man who is it has been so awesome. It's been wonderful, and so it's like anything else. I'm there for next season, and then we have to look at the following season. We just have to look to see what's going to happen. Just personally, can I do it? I'd love to do it. A brand new stadium, beautiful stadium. That'll be a lot of fun.
But I mean, there's a certain amount of sadness that obviously goes with it. I know the day that they announced that the Woo Sox were going to be a thing, I drove out to District 15. I went over to that Whole Foods in Garden City, which I don't really like Whole Foods that much anyway, but I went there, got some lunch, and just drove around there listening to the press conference. Mick Mattiello's district, thinking about the politics behind the Paw Sox Stadium.
Sure.
Now, you can go back and forth on whether or not the plan itself was appropriate or not. Obviously, if you really analyze it, compared to other publicly funded stadiums, it was a good plan, but some people had agendas,
The way I look at it now, and, at some point, time will tell. For the price of a pedestrian footbridge, you could have had your state investment in the in a new ballpark.
That's right. Would they have had Brazilian hardwood seats at the downtown Providence? I'm sorry, pardon me, the Apex building if it had been acquired?
I don't know if they would have had it in the stands. I definitely would have had one up at the PA chair. If I could tell you that now.
The mic holder with a mic stand would be the finest bamboo available.
It's funny because as they've been designing it, a few times Larry Lucchino and the other guys have come up and during games when they were designing designing the new ballpark, they would come up and they'd have a measuring tape and they'd be like, "Can you announce in a smaller space? Can you?" It's going to become a
phone. It'll be like John DePete, the WNRI studio up there. Like
it's like I could simulcast from my house and just Skype in. So long as I'm watching a video of the game, I can announce. No, but it's going to be exciting. It's unfortunate what happened the way it did, and however you want to look at it. The true story is going to be, what's going to happen at the end of September, or what's the announcement going to be, what's going to come here and fill that space, and how will Rhode Island, how will Southern New England in this area, that side of the Blackstone Valley, how will they rebound? And there's a great opportunity there for an amazing story. There really is.
I totally agree. I was at Dragon Boat Races I guess it was 2 weekends ago, a great Northern Rhode Island event. Spent some time with the McKee camp, kind of talking to some people that are involved in the broad economic development process up there.
Yep.
And no question about it. I mean, that story should be kind of at the midpoint now. And I think a lot of people are in the mindset that, Hasbro's pulling out, the train station's over budget.
Sure.
Pawtucket sucks. For that whole mentality is pervasive around the state, where in reality, you've got people like Lindsay Lerner, who put an RFP in for McCoy Stadium to develop basically an artist work-live space out of the building. So all the way through soccer and whatever, we'll see what happens.
And I will say this, they've had all the reason and the ammunition in the world to say no. Yeah, we're not gonna allow any other major league or minor league team to come here because it's in our market. We have the right to say no. I have heard firsthand from the various powers that be there at McCoy and with the Paw Sox organization, just as it stands, that they're more excited about the sport. That they would not say they wouldn't put the kibosh on baseball happening at McCoy. That might be an avenue they go. It may not, but they don't want to. They were very impressed with Grebian's efforts, and they think very highly of him. They want to see that area. The fact of the matter is, they need a new facility. I mean, this winter, walk through that place. It's you have to wear rain boots and snow boots because snow comes inside, and you need that world-class facilities, world-class athletes that are going on the major level. We've talked about this, and I won't go on about it, but the updates need to happen. So we'll see what happens as far as what they bring. I just know that there will be great support and encouragement from the Paw Sox side, and as Worcester comes into focus, there's still another great season of baseball happening in McCoy. A child is only 7 years old for one summer, 8 years old for one summer. So, don't deny a child the opportunity to go to a ball game at a ridiculously affordable place, at a special place. Don't deny them because, you're old and you want to spite, it's not,
Nick Mattiello.
Yeah, exactly. That's not the point. So.
Yeah. No, I understand. It's I'd like to be there at the final game. I'm hoping that
I'll sneak you in. If there's an issue with tickets, just call me. I'll get you up in the press box and let you take over.
That's that'll be a hallmark moment. It'll be like when the Colts left Baltimore and people are jumping over the stands trying to shake hands, beg them to stay.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, hopefully it won't be. It will certainly won't be in the middle of the night a secretive operation. That's for sure. But but interesting fact, Larry Lucchino, who is the team president, who has had quite a history with professional sports, really, he's got an interesting story about being around and with that whole element in Baltimore, and he worked for the Orioles for a while, so it all ties in. Yeah, it's really cool that he brought that up. So. Another story for another
time. Ben DeCastro, ladies and gentlemen, Rhode Island media mogul, and watch him on Studio 10 now. That's a fun place to get a lot of fun content these days. So
we're trying to have fun.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. It's always a great pleasure to spend some time together here on the pod. Remember, I'll be back on Tuesday with a brand new episode, and there's daily content on Instagram at Bartholomewtown Podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody, and until next week, I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk soon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.